In an interview with the Halifax Chronicle Herald, he told how he responded to people asking for him to spend even more government money. And he said, and I quote, "As soon as you do that, inflation goes up by exactly the same amount."
Did you see the moment Trudeau's face turned pale? In a shocking live TV confrontation, Pierre Poilievre unleashed a barrage of hard-hitting facts that left the Prime Minister speechless. From skyrocketing housing costs to ethical violations, Poilievre exposed it all. But what happened next will make your jaw drop. Stay tuned to witness the political takedown of the decade. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel.
Right? Why didn't I think of that? Oh, goodness. Spending money you don't have actually causes inflation. If he's in the middle of having epiphanies, has he also realized that budgets don't balance themselves?
Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. As Trudeau strutted back from his New York climate talks, Poilievre was ready to pounce. The Prime Minister had barely set foot on Canadian soil when the opposition leader launched a blistering attack on his climate policies. Poilievre wasted no time highlighting the stark contrast between Trudeau's jet-setting lifestyle and the harsh reality faced by average Canadians. While the PM was hobnobbing with global elites, families back home were struggling to make ends meet under the crushing weight of ever-increasing carbon taxes.
They have stood and objected against and even campaigned against dental care for seniors over the past many months, but we've delivered to over 100,000 seniors.
Mr. Trudeau, how do you justify flying around in private jets to lecture everyday Canadians about their carbon footprint? Poilievre demanded, his voice dripping with disdain. You're forcing hardworking people to choose between heating their homes and putting food on the table, all while you zoom around the globe in luxury. The opposition leader didn't stop there. He mockingly imitated Trudeau's New York speech, drawing laughs from his supporters. "Oh, look at me! I'm saving the planet by taxing Canadian families into poverty." Poilievre's impression was met with thunderous applause from his side of the aisle. As Trudeau squirmed uncomfortably in his seat, Poilievre pressed on. He rattled off statistic after statistic, showing how the carbon tax had failed to reduce emissions while inflicting economic pain on ordinary citizens. The PM's face grew redder with each accusation. When it was finally Trudeau's turn to respond, he fumbled for words. His usual smooth rhetoric deserted him as he struggled to defend his position. Climate change is a serious threat," he stammered, unable to muster a coherent argument against Poilievre's onslaught. The exchange left Trudeau looking rattled and out of touch. As the debate moved on to the next topic, it was clear that Poilievre had struck a devastating blow against the Prime Minister's carefully crafted image as a climate champion. But little did Trudeau know, this was just the beginning of his nightmarish confrontation with Poilievre. Just when Trudeau thought he'd weathered the storm, Poilievre dropped another explosive revelation. 2 ethics violations hung over the Prime Minister's head like a dark cloud. But it wasn't just the violations that shocked the nation. It was Trudeau's apparent ignorance of the very laws he swore to uphold. Poilievre wasted no time in bringing up Trudeau's shameful record. "Mr. Prime Minister, you've been found guilty of breaking the Ethics Act not once, but twice. How can Canadians trust you to lead with integrity when you can't even follow the rules yourself?" Trudeau's face turned an even deeper shade of red as he scrambled to defend himself. But Poilievre was just getting started. He zeroed in on a crucial part of the law that Trudeau seemed to have conveniently forgotten. "Let's talk about Section 21 of the Ethics Act," Poilievre pressed. "Can you tell us what it says, Mr. Prime Minister?" Trudeau's response was nothing short of embarrassing. "I've read the Ethics Act many times," he stammered, clearly caught off guard. But when asked to recall the specifics of Section 21, the Prime Minister drew a complete blank. The room fell silent as everyone watched Trudeau squirm. How could the leader of our country not know such a crucial part of the law, especially after being convicted twice? Poilievre didn't let up. Section 21 states that a prime minister must step aside from decisions where there's a conflict of interest. You broke this rule, and now you can't even remember it? This is unbelievable. The impact of this exchange was immediate and devastating. Trudeau's credibility crumbled before everyone's eyes. Canadians watching at home were left wondering how their prime minister could be so clueless about such an important law. As Trudeau fumbled for words, trying to salvage what was left of his reputation, Poilievre prepared to deliver the final blow. The opposition leader's eyes gleamed with determination as he shifted gears, ready to dive into another scandal that had rocked Trudeau's government. Speaking of ethics violations, Poilievre began, his voice filled with purpose. Let's talk about the WE charity scandal. The Prime Minister's face fell as he realized this nightmare was far from over. The WE charity scandal seemed like old news, but Poilievre had an ace up his sleeve. He asked Trudeau a simple question about money. The answer, or lack thereof, sent shockwaves through Parliament. What financial detail could be so damning that even the Prime Minister couldn't recall it? Poilievre wasted no time refreshing everyone's memory about the WE charity controversy. It was a scandal that rocked Trudeau's government, involving his family receiving payments from an organization he tried to funnel $500 million to. Talk about a conflict of interest. But Poilievre wasn't interested in rehashing old news. He had a specific target in mind. How much did your spouse receive in reimbursed expenses or other benefits from this organization? He demanded, his eyes locked on Trudeau. The Prime Minister's response was shocking. He claimed the figures were public but couldn't remember the exact amounts. Can you believe it? The leader of our country, unable to recall how much money his own family received in a major scandal. Poilievre pounced on this weakness. It's unbelievable, he declared. The Prime Minister doesn't know how much his family got from an organization he tried to give $500 million to. This is a public undressing by Poilievre live on air. The opposition leader wasn't done. He pressed Trudeau on his knowledge of the conflict of interest. In a stunning admission, Trudeau confessed he knew about the conflict, but didn't call the ethics commissioner or step aside from decisions related to the charity. As Trudeau squirmed under the spotlight, you could feel the tension in the room. Everyone wondered, what other bombshells was Poilievre about to drop? The WE charity scandal had already damaged public trust in Trudeau's government. Now, his inability to provide simple financial figures was adding fuel to the fire. The impact of this exchange was clear. Trudeau's credibility took another massive hit. How could Canadians trust a leader who couldn't remember crucial details about his own family's involvement in a major scandal? Poilievre had scored another devastating blow against Trudeau. But he wasn't finished yet. As the Prime Minister struggled to regain his composure, Poilievre shifted gears. Now, let's talk about your economic failures, he said, his voice filled with determination. Trudeau's nightmare was far from over. Let's talk about your economic failures, Poilievre said. Little did Trudeau know, this was just the beginning of an explosive takedown. How could housing costs double while wages stagnate? The answer would leave Canadians stunned. Poilievre wasted no time exposing the harsh reality of Trudeau's economic mismanagement. He pointed out that under Trudeau's watch, housing costs in Canada had skyrocketed, doubling in price and crushing the dreams of countless families hoping to own a home. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The Conservative leader dropped a bombshell statistic. $500 billion in investment had fled Canada during Trudeau's tenure. Can you believe it? Businesses were running for the hills, driven away by sky-high taxes and disastrous economic policies. Trudeau's face turned ghostly pale as Poilievre continued his relentless assault. While you've been busy patting yourself on the back, Prime Minister, American workers are now earning $22,000 more than their Canadian counterparts, Poilievre thundered. The gap was widening, and Canadian workers were feeling the pain of Trudeau's failed leadership. But wait, there's more. Poilievre painted a grim picture of once thriving logging towns in British Columbia turned into ghost towns. The forestry industry, once the lifeblood of these communities, had been decimated under Trudeau's watch. Families were struggling, and entire towns were dying. As if that wasn't enough, Poilievre hammered Trudeau on his incompetence in international trade. He reminded everyone how former Prime Minister Harper had secured crucial exemptions from American tariffs, while Trudeau had failed miserably at the negotiating table. The result? Increased tariffs and more job losses for hardworking Canadians. Trudeau squirmed in his seat, desperately searching for a way to defend his so-called economic success. But how could he possibly justify the rampant tax increases that had driven investment out of Canada and left businesses struggling to compete? As Poilievre delivered blow after devastating blow, it became clear that Trudeau's carefully crafted image of economic prosperity was nothing but a house of cards. And now, thanks to Poilievre's relentless pursuit of the truth, that house was crumbling before our very eyes. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited for Trudeau's response. Could he possibly salvage his reputation after this brutal takedown? Or had Poilievre finally exposed the true cost of Trudeau's economic failures for all Canadians to see?